I'm Miss Paula Leona Ong Alvos. I am part of the IPAS team. I'm also one of the educators and success coaches. And I am here tonight to present to you another NCLEX NGN presentation. The cases that I will be presenting tonight, usually these are typical cases that we handle here in the United States. And hopefully I will be able to share to you, class, every trends that we have here in practice, all the gadgets, devices that we have been using for most of our patients here, and also what are the common practices that we deal with in our daily lives. I hope you guys can participate with us tonight. Anyways, thank you for your time. Okay, so first things first, I would like to present to you the six functions of the clinical judgment. So as you've noticed, and I know everybody's aware of this, since they made changes on the NCLEX format since last year, I mean 2 years ago. So they started by presenting to you the case study that they call. So usually you have the six-part question, okay, or the standalone. So usually a standalone, it's still a case study scenario, but given the fact you are only given one question to answer. But if you are given the six parts, this is the classic NGN that we know of, you know? So first things first, you must be able to recognize cues. So meaning to say, you really need to know what are the red flags, no? What are the common presentations of this patient? Why is this patient here? What is the common problem? Okay, so first things first, you need to know what matters most, as it says here, okay? So that deals with your skills and your knowledge pertaining on how you assess your patient. Okay. Second is analyzing cues. So what is the biggest red flag here? And you are starting to create your decision here, like what could be the real problem this patient is having, while correlating all your assessment and your data gathering, and you put that into your analyzation, and then you're able to tell the hallmark or the telltale signs of what should be prioritized with this client, no? Okay, third is prioritizing your hypothesis. So where do I start? It says here. Okay, so you're trying to gather your clinical question, like hypothesis, meaning to say, what condition might this patient be having? Is it related to the AFib? Is it related to CVA? Is it related to another septic signs and symptoms, or whatever you think of, because they'll try to confuse you with other conditions that will make you think that, oh, this is what the patient is having versus what is really this patient is having right now. So they're trying to confuse you when it comes to prioritizing hypothesis. But fret not, you still have 3 more chances because you still have your part 4, part 5, and part 6. So you can still redeem yourself there, So generating solutions, meaning to say, usually they will be giving you scenarios that will ask you, what will be your priority nursing assessment here? Or what will be your priority nursing actions that you will be performing to this patient? Knowing the fact that you need to analyze the rationale behind it, Okay, taking action is quite similar to your part 4, what will I do? So here, you will still be asked on how to prioritize your actions. Okay, 6 is talking about evaluating outcomes. So since you dealt with part 1 to 5, here in part 6, you will be able to determine if did your actions help your client, or did your patient improve, or did they deteriorate, okay? Or in other words, if they're going home, you will be providing your nursing education to your clientele and also to your families. And you will be able to determine if they understood the instructions very well. Usually they will leave you statements like, which of the following statements are incorrect or correct, or they would even ask if the patient improved or did the patient did not improve at all. Okay? Yeah, I hope you are with me. Okay, so that's your 6-part nursing clinical judgment model. Okay, or like I mentioned a while ago, you will also have scenarios like a standalone question. So meaning to say there will be a nursing scenario. It's like a story, okay, similar to your part 1 to 6, but your format could be what? A SATA question-based format, or your favorite the bow tie format. Okay, that's very similar to your standalone scenario. Okay, so here in IPAS class, we will be able to help you on how to master attacking your NCLEX NGN. Okay, so all of us educators, majority of us are all based in the US. So we will be able to teach you on how to think like a US nurse. Okay, and we will be able to help and guide you throughout the process with the help of IPAS processing and also our team, which is the IPAS Mentor Academy. So we do have coaches, no, review coaches who will guide and assist you on how to navigate your review. Okay, so your review journey from start to finish. And as you can see, class, you will see from our Hope Talk that we have already hundreds and thousands of nurses who have successfully passed the NCLEX exam with the help of IPAS program. Okay, anyway, so without further ado, so let's start this now. Okay, so first things first, we have the case scenario here. So I'm giving you the classic clinical judgment model from part 1 to 6. So let's first start by reading on the left side note. Okay, so you will see there the history and physical. You will also have the nurse's notes. You will also see vital signs or laboratory or diagnostic tests. Sometimes they even interchange the terms. So be careful. What you need to know here is what is the admitting diagnosis. What is the chief complaint of your patient? Because class, the question will even try to distract you. You know, they will try to distract you with statements that are not really relevant to what's going on with this client. Okay, so Mr. Eswiner is an 83-year-old Asian American patient, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 2 months ago. 3 years shortly after his wife passed away, he was taken to the emergency department after the 55-year-old daughter found him at the front doorway this evening after he wandered from his daughter's home. He fell and hit his left hip and sustained a soft tissue injury on the left wrist. Okay, second is, upon assessment, he said that he can state his name but is very disoriented to place, time, and event. Here, class, our common practice here is we call this the ANO. So ANO means you're trying to determine the alertness and orientation of your patient. Easy ANO times 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. So meaning to say, if you are perfect with the ANO times 4, meaning you are alert and oriented to yourself, your birthday, the time, the date, and the event on why you are being sent to the hospital. So oftentimes, class, your clients will come to the floor and they're ANO times 1. So that's the common lingo we use here. So ANO times 1 means you are only aware to yourself. Everything else, you have failed the questions. You don't even know the event today, don't even know the time, the date, and everything. So that's the common lingo we have here. Anyway, so it says here he's very disoriented to place, time, and event. So meaning to say, the score of your patient here is quite ANO times 1. Okay, he's very agitated, restless, and is always trying to get up from bed. So what does it mean? Is your patient posing a risk for safety? Do you think this patient will likely fall or will likely sustain an injury from a fall? So as a nurse, that is your common what? Priority. Okay, so meaning to say safety is always our priority with this kind of client. So given the fact that he's also 83 years old, he already had what? Alzheimer's? Okay, and what else? So what is the main issue here? The daughter found him, okay, in the doorway. And he sustained some injuries. He fell and hit his left hip and sustained a soft tissue injury to the left wrist. So you're still trying to think, oh, did this patient sustain a fracture or other injuries involved? Did he hit his head? So those are the things that will make you think about this scenario, isn't it? Okay, so it says here also that he has a degree of speech latency and preservation. So meaning to say, when you ask this patient a question, it takes a while, okay? It takes a while before he responds to your question. So meaning to say he stares in blank space or his eyes wandered inside the room and is trying to divert your attention, you know? Okay, so he keeps repeating statements such as, it is burning, it burns down there. So what does it mean? So he was pointing at his crotch area. So which makes you think, is he hurting down there? So what's the real deal? Okay, he denies a memory of wandering or falling. Okay, so he isn't even aware that he already fell. So he's not aware of that. Okay, other thing is what? His daughter expresses concern that his condition, what it's saying here, has developed gradually and seemed to be getting worse over the few months. Okay, so meaning to say his dementia is getting worse. That's what the daughter meant. She states that at times he seems to be disoriented, depressed, and tearful. He's also constantly forgetting things out of the ordinary, such as placing things in the odd places, like his daily medications and names of the closest family members and friends. She also added that he lost a lot of weight since he has poor appetite most of the time. So she's telling a story about what's going on, but the real problem here is the injury he sustained. So these were the common scenarios that happens at home, okay, which is still your concern as his nurse. Okay, second thing that you need to watch out for is you need to finish the whole story reading while you're reading the left-hand side. She even says that the neighbors found the father down the street 2 days ago and he did not know where he was. The daughter is now upset and bursts out crying. My dad is always such a sweet and loving jolly man. I noticed that he was never able to move on from mommy because remember, he lost his wife 3 years ago. So we don't know if that made his condition a lot worse since he lost his wife, his significant other. So usually these things contributes to their deterioration class. This is very common. How can this be? Look at him. He needs a lot of help with his daily activities. He's always up the whole night, rummaging with his stuff. I can't be there for him all the time. I have work. I'm getting overwhelmed and frustrated with our situation. I don't know what to do. And our other family members live more than 60 miles away from my house. I cannot do this all on my own. So reading this statement, class, what makes you think? She is quite overwhelmed taking care of her dad. So what's the common practice here, class? They send their families or their parents to what? A nursing home. Because usually they cannot deal with all this by themselves, no? So that's the common practice here. They send the parents somewhere. Okay, they send another person to take care of their parents as well. Okay, so you can read it from here that she's quite overwhelmed, she's quite frustrated, and she sounds to be upset, you know? Okay, what is the next one? So we read the assessment now. Neurologic tells you he's quite ANO times 1, disoriented to place, time, and event, and is anxious and very restless. Okay, but the cardiovascular tells you that he is normal. Okay, capillary refill less than 2 seconds, which is normal as well, and pulses is palpable in 3 extremities. In all extremities. So respiratory tells you there's nothing, there's no problem. So I'll put an N on the side here. Genitourinary tells you that it's foul-smelling dark yellow colored urine with urinary incontinence. So something's wrong with your GU, isn't it? So it only means to say that your patient even complained that it's burning down there, it burns and it hurts. So which makes it think you're creating a hypothesis in your head. Oh, this would be related to UTI. So the fact that your patient had Alzheimer/dementia plus UTI, do you think that could trigger a delirium episode? What do you think? It could be a possibility, class. Pneumonia, UTI, these are the common conditions that causes your patient to have delirium episodes. Plus the fact that they also have dementia to begin with, okay? So it's like double whammy for your patient, okay? But the thing that we need to deal with is the delirium part. We need to treat the cause, no? We need to start treating the cause so that it can help, put your patient back to their baseline. Yes, you cannot change the fact that they have the dementia already, but the fact that they're having delirium, we need to treat that part, okay? Next is what? Gastrointestinal. There is normal active bowel sounds times 4. No complaints of abdominal distension, and last bowel movement was the other day. So meaning to say, do you think your patient is having some sort of small bowel obstruction? I don't think so, because your patient is still moving his bowels, okay? Plus the fact that there's no abdominal distension, everything looks normal. Everything looks normal active based on your nursing assessment. So I'll put here a letter N on the side. Okay, musculoskeletal. So the daughter reports that her father was ambulating independently at home without any use of a walker or cane. But now he reports minimal to moderate pain to the left hip, soft injury to the left wrist with a compression wrap. Okay, so both sides with slight redness and tenderness, full range of motion to bilateral arms and legs. So here I'm finding a lot of abnormalities. Okay, but the good thing is upon baseline, so before everything went downhill, her father was what? He was normally walking at home without any ambulatory aids, which is quite good. Okay. Next is what? Sensory. It says here that he's hard of hearing to the right ear and he wears a hearing aid. No vision impairment, but there's sunken eyes, which makes you think, well, does he have a sunken eyes? Okay, so you're starting to think, is this patient well hydrated at home? Does he drink a lot of water? Okay, so which makes you think he has UTI, now he has sunken eyes. Okay, so your hypothesis would be like, oh, I'm trying to think of what? Some sort of dehydration, okay? In which dehydration can easily be linked to your UTI. Do you agree? I hope you guys agree with me. Okay, so here we'll put a negative. Okay, another thing, he's also hard of hearing, which he has done some sort of solution to that, whereas your patient is already wearing a hearing aid. Your only concern as a nurse is what? When they get admitted to the floor, wait, did this patient brought his hearing aid or is it charged? Is the battery charged? So me as a nurse, whenever I take care of patients with hard of hearing or if they wear some sort of hearing aids, I always make sure that they're plugged, they're charged, it's not low bat or anything. So usually my patient will instruct me, since I'm going to sleep, can you charge my hearing aids? So whenever he tries to ambulate, I put it back on him so he can hear my instructions. So because that's part of my safety assessment, okay? All right, next, psychosocial. What's the problem here? He lives in a single family home with his daughter, who is also his primary caregiver. No wonder, class, the daughter was already ranting out to you that she is very, very overwhelmed because she is seeing everything and she's very exhausted, okay? So I don't find anything wrong with here because the good thing is he lives with his daughter and he doesn't live somewhere else. I've met elderly here that lives like 40 miles away from their children and the father or the mother already has advanced dementia or Alzheimer, which is very, very disheartening. Integumentary tells you decreased skin turgor and dry mucous membranes. So link that with your sensory here, which is the sunken eyes. Do you think they're all quite interconnected? Yes, I do agree because like I said, it looks like a dehydration issue for me. All right, next problem. So shall we deal with the vital signs now? So vital signs tells you that he is 134.75. Pulse is quite irregular. Let's try to figure out why is it irregular, no? Temperature is 98.2, which is quite normal as long as, okay, what is the red flag? It is not greater than 100 degrees Fahrenheit because that's the start of your fever. Okay, respiration tells you is 20, which is still on the normal range. And your oxygen saturation is 98. And he did a random blood sugar because you might be thinking of, oh, he could be what? Hypoglycemic. Let's check it out. But it tells you it's 98. So that is also normal. Okay. So here, I'm still having a question mark here. Why is it irregular? We don't know yet. Okay. Although the BP tells you 134/75. Okay. That's another question mark. Is he hypertensive? Okay. Is he taking any medications for that? Okay, so these are your hypotheses that you are creating in your head. Okay, medical tells you, the history tells you he does have AFib. Now, that answers your question, why is the pulse irregular? Okay, so this is part of your history. I'll put an HX on the side. Now, this answers your question, why does he have a 134/75 blood pressure? Because it talks about your hypertension history. He also has, what, hyperlipidemia, and a congestive heart failure, and diabetes too. So luckily, when you assess his cardiovascular, because you're thinking congestive heart failure, does everything look normal? Is he having some episodes of edema? So if you look at your cardiovascular here, it doesn't say anything that talks about a CHF exacerbation, okay? Exacerbation means usually they'll come with what? Some issues with breathing because they're fully fluid overloaded, no? Okay, what else? You will see their face is very puffy, extremities very puffy, and even especially the legs, no? Because you will see what? Signs of edema, okay? Which this client doesn't have. So what is the real deal here? So the real problem, what's going on here is what? Safety and the false event, okay? Okay, what else? We're not done yet because we're going to talk about the medications. So he does have apixaban Eliquis, which he takes for the what? This is commonly taken for your AFib. This is an anticoag class. Okay, so apixaban Eliquis helps with that. Yes, the irregular heart rate will still be there, but at least they're not what? At least they don't have coagulation in their blood. So the apixaban helps to fix that. The only problem that we deal with an irregular pulse, if the heart rate goes beyond 100. Okay, because that will talk about what? Or what? Which event are we talking about? Okay, AFib with RVR. Okay, rapid ventricular response. Okay, so that is very common. That's a very common problem, class, because they can throw off clots anytime. They can form clots anytime. Okay, especially if they're not taking any what? Any beta blockers or any anticoags like your Eliquis, they can throw off clots anytime. But this guy is under maintenance, so plus his pulse is quite good, so I don't think there's a problem with the pulse. And irregular is always there. It will not be gone. Okay? What else? He also has donepezil. Why does he have donepezil? This medication is very common with what? With your Alzheimer's patients. So remember, class, your donepezil will not treat the Alzheimer. The Alzheimer will always be there. But the donepezil will help what? Maintain what? Will help maintain their cognitive function. It will not make it worse, but it will try to maintain that. Okay? So that he will not progress further. Okay, sacubitril valsartan. This is a very common drug for patients which have what? Patients who have hypertension plus signs of CHF. Sacubitril valsartan is very common among these individuals. Okay. Next is what? Metformin, because he has what? Diabetes. Next is atorvastatin, because it was mentioned also that he also has what? HLD. Okay. All right. So what is under the diagnostics? So what's the abnormal now? So diagnostic tells you that when they did the CBC, the WBC was 13,000, which talks about positive infection, question mark. It could be a sign of an infection, isn't it? Okay, next problem is the urinalysis, because it was mentioned he complains of pain on his crotch, on his groin, and he said that it's burning down there. Now, this confirms your question, could he be having some sort of UTI? That's the next question. Okay, third is what? So they made a confirmatory, among his musculoskeletal issue. Okay, so we're good now because why? There's no fracture found, on the injury site. However, when they did the mini cognitive test, they found some cognitive impairment, which is very, very common result among your patients with Alzheimer's disease. Okay, so this is what? This is sort of a baseline for me. So at least your musculoskeletal tells you that it's normal, no fracture noted. So all we need to deal with is what? Let's talk about it now. Okay, so select the top 5 client findings that the nurse should prioritize for the follow-up. So it tells you here, do you think, guys, that we will deal with the irregular heart rate? I'm watching your comments right now. Do you think there will be a problem with the irregular heart rate? I'm waiting for everyone's response or somebody's response who could help me out here. Okay, like I said, class, his irregular heart rate is part of his baseline, and we don't see any problem right now, right? So you're seeing here, his heart rate is under 98, which is not showing any sign of AFib with RVR. Do you agree? So the answer here is we will not include the irregular heart rate. How about the blood pressure? The blood pressure is still within what? You're maintained with the sacubitril valsartan. So, and your heart rate is not really that high. It's still within an acceptable range of 134/75. So for me, I will not include this one. But the problem here is what? How about the restlessness? Do you think the restlessness will be a problem? Yes. Because why? This poses a risk for safety. Okay. Oh, thank you for those who answered. Miss Gina said no, and Miss Cheryl Talosig said also no, thank you. Yes, so we do agree with the A and B as being no, okay? Next is what? Diabetes mellitus. So for me, this is part of his what? His history, no? And the acute checks tells you it's 98. Okay, although it's not mentioned there, is it a type 2 or no? It's mentioned there it's a type 2 DM. So the only time this will be a problem, it will make you think that this is a Hyperglycemic hyperosmolar, okay, if you're thinking of HHNS, is what? If they're showing signs of what? Okay, a blood sugar of an increase greater than, typically greater than 600, no? Okay, so, and plus the signs and symptoms of other things related to your HHNS, which he doesn't have. Okay, so wandering and pacing episode, do you think this also poses a risk for safety related to your restlessness? Yes, so E is also included, okay? Okay, thank you, Miss Gina. Okay, Gina said no issues and the history. Yes, I agree with that. Thank you. Okay, how about disorientation? Do you think, class, disorientation is also related here that we should prioritize? Do you think we should prioritize also the disorientation? Although we know that he is what? He is Alzheimer, but it says here, if you read the selections closely, it says here he's what? He's agitated and restless and he's always trying to get up from bed. So you're trying to impose rules like, hey, don't try to get out of bed, you know? But the patient is clearly not understanding your instructions and is clearly not following you. So this one is what? Do you think this is also a priority? Yes. Disorientation will also be a priority. I agree. Okay, how about the next one? Genitourinary assessment findings. So we all agreed, class. So this patient seemed to be having some sign of delirium. So the way your delirium is triggered is by what? Could be possibly related to sign of your UTI or your dehydration. Okay, plus the history of Alzheimer. Okay, equals what? Equals delirium. Okay, yan. So that is a big factor, no? Okay, cool. So let's add the genitourinary assessment findings because we find some abnormality, which is the infection, which is very apparent to this patient. Okay, how about caregiver fatigue? Can we deal with that later? Yes, I know. She's been expressing to you her concerns. She's very overwhelmed. Can we deal with the fatigue later on in the long run? But right now, we should deal with the real problem, no? We should talk about the patient first, no? And we deal with the problem of the family member second. Okay, so we can deal with this later on. I'm not saying that, hey, I am not acknowledging your feelings, you're not a priority. But still, this family member should still be a priority upon follow-up or upon the course of treatment. So we can deal with this one later. Okay, how about the dehydration? How about your dehydration? So this is the last one. So now you're stuck with psychosocial assessment and your dehydration. Like I said, class, your psychosocial assessment, I don't find anything wrong with that one because it clearly tells you that this patient lives with the family member. He's not being neglected. The daughter is always with him. So I don't find anything wrong with the psychosocial. It's just the fact that she says that she is overwhelmed. That's the only concern that we have right now. But upon assessment, he's fine. He's not homeless. At least he's not homeless. He doesn't live 40 miles away from his daughter. At least he's not being neglected of care. Okay? All right. So, psychosocial assessment is also normal for me. So, now you're dealing with dehydration. Because this plays a big role to contributing to your delirium episode. Okay, are you still with me, class? Okay, I hope you're not overwhelmed. Okay, I just talked fast, but I hope you guys get the picture here. Okay, okay, so the answers are what? Restlessness, wandering, and pacing episode, followed by your disorientation and your genitourinary assessment findings, and last but not the least is your dehydration. Okay, good job, class. Good job. Now we're gonna talk about signs of your delirium, no? What contributes to your delirium, followed by your Alzheimer's disease. In IPAS class, we will be discussing to you as we go along with teaching you on how to attack your NGN. We will go in thorough detail on how we ended up that way, on why we think that way, no? So we will be teaching you the basics or what is the components of your Alzheimer's disease on what you see on your screen. So this is part of our IPAS roadmap. So we do provide lectures like the IPAS roadmap. Like it's our lecture book, okay? And that is usually our guide that we use, no, that we utilize for teaching our students, no. I will not be going to further detail about Alzheimer's disease, but I want to deal more with the delirium. So whenever we go with delirium class, usually you have an acute onset or fluctuating course. So meaning to say, is it sudden? Okay, usually it is being described by a sudden change in their behavior. So like I said, so your patient or the dad or the mom really has dementia or has Alzheimer. But at baseline, she's calm, she's fine, she's just confused. But suddenly, their behavior changed by what? Acting different, no? They're kind of agitated, they're restless, they're upset, they scream, they cuss, they even commit what? They inflict physical injury to the caregiver. Sometimes it also happens, no? Okay, in my practice, I got punched by an elderly before because of delirium. So it's very, very common here. Okay, what else, class? Restlessness. You'll see the word restlessness all the time. Inattention means you're trying to get their attention, but, they're not paying attention to you. They clearly are not paying attention to you. Okay, so meaning to say, you cannot finish the assessment because they keep moving around. They keep walking around. They want to get out of the bed. So as a nurse, how can I assess this patient if he's being inattentive? No, it's hard to get his attention. Mahirap makuha yung kanyang cooperation. So that's what it means by your inattention. Okay, how about disorganized thinking? The way I was taught here, class, by the senior nurses is like, Paula, don't just ask them about the ANO times 4. You also need to ask them, like, can you tell me the days of the week? Of course, they will tell you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, can you tell that to me backwards? Like you start with Sunday, Saturday, Friday, Thursday. If they're able to do that, it means to say they are not disorganized thinking. Okay, the next challenge that I ask the elderly is tell me the months in a year, like January to December. And then I'll ask the elderly, can you tell that to me backwards? So that's how we test them with disorganized thinking. That's another technique that I want to share to you, class. Okay, so another one that will make you think that he's very disorganized is what? When the patient talks, does he make any sense? Or is he talking nonsense or illogical? Is he rambling? Is the patient very unpredictable? That's part of your disorganized thinking too. Okay, how about number 4? Okay, outer level of consciousness, like I said, this is similar to your number 1. My mother doesn't act that way. And now she's suddenly, she looks funny. She looks different, no? That's part of your altered LOC. She's very vigilant. She's very hyperactive, hyper alert. What else? Or, worst case scenario, you try to tap her shoulder to wake her up, but she's very somnolent. She's very hard to wake up, no? Okay, or the patient gets easily startled. So those are part of your altered level of consciousness, okay? So these are the signs that will make you think of delirium. So like I said, class, I'll repeat again, delirium is triggered by an event which as like your UTI or pneumonia, okay, plus their cognitive impairment, okay, plus infection equals delirium. Okay, what else? What else can cause delirium? Okay, patients who are under substance abuse. What else? What else can cause your delirium? Infection event or under your anesthesia. Post-anesthesia can even cause delirium, which is very common too, okay? All right, this is the mental status exam that I was telling you about a while ago, but you don't need to take pictures of this. So you just need to know the appearance. Are they well-groomed? Do they smell funny? Are they wearing the gown properly? We need to also check their level of alertness, their behavior. Are they cooperative? Are they agitated? Okay, are they physically or verbally abusive? Okay, that's very common with behavioral problems. Okay, how about the mood? Okay, and affect. Do they look flat affect or, Okay, what else? Thought process. Okay, and the thought content. Okay, are they delusional? Are they paranoid? As being mentioned here. Okay. Okay, I think we should deal with the next question now. Okay, so I need your help, class. Okay, which factor best explains the client's finding? Now it's your turn to answer this question, class. So what will be your answer in number 2? In the nursing clinical judgment model, we are now on analyzing cues. So what will be your answer in number 2 then? So we have all decided that hyperglycemia is not really, in fact, the real problem here because your blood sugar is still within range, plus the fact that he's taking metformin, which quite, helps with maintaining his blood sugars. Okay, immobility is why. Immobility is not seem to be a problem because why? Your patient was able to walk to begin with without any aids. What else? But the only problem with your immobility is the injury that he sustained. But there's a greater problem than your immobility. And last but not the least, your RVR is not a problem here because your AFib is very, very well controlled by the Eliquis, plus your heart rate is within normal range. So class, what will be your answer here? So She Ratalosig answered also A, dehydration. What else? Any other questions? Any other answers, I mean? So yeah, you're thinking of dehydration, yes or no? Why? Like I said, delirium can be triggered by your dehydration. Dehydration, which leads to your UTI. UTI, which is manifested by having increase in WBC, and which is also manifested in your, in the results of your, in your urine screening, okay? So dehydration is our answer in number 2. Thank you so much. All right, next is a little bit more challenging here because which of the following complications is he likely experiencing? So let's just put an X, or I'll just put a check mark here to specify whether your patient is at risk or not at risk of developing. So first things first, HHNS is not a big problem, although he has DM type 2. But like I said, your blood sugar is within range. He's in 90. He's not even showing a sign of 500 blood sugar or greater than 600. So HHNS is not a problem here. How about dementia? Your patient already has the dementia class, mind you. So it's already part of baseline. So do you think this is an acute problem? Dementia is already what? Chronic. So any chronic problem will not be your concern at this time. So this one is not a risk. How about CVA? CVA is also not a problem. Why? Your patient is already taking what? Eliquis. Let me just put here Eliquis. Okay, so he's under well maintenance. And plus the fact, do you think your patient is showing signs of CVA here? Does the speech look slurred? Okay, is he unbalanced? Does he have an unbalanced gait? Okay, any other signs of CVA should be manifested here. But as you can see on the history and the physical assessment, he's not showing even any signs of CVA, so not a risk as well. But yes, indeed, your falls and injuries is the main concern, plus your urinary tract infection, which must be dealt with anytime soon. Okay, we should treat this right away to stop the delirium from progressing further. How about your sleep deprivation? So as you've read along, remember the story here, you will see signs that your patient is wandering at night. Your patient is wandering at night, so we do have a concern with what? With his, what is it mentioned here? With the sleep deprivation, because he's always awake at night, he wanders at night. And that doesn't help with his Alzheimer's disease, no? It might even progress further, no, if we don't deal with this. How about malnutrition? Yes, he does have signs of dehydration. Okay, which means to say we are now concerned with hydration, nutrition. Is he well nourished? And it was also mentioned there that he lost a lot of weight. Loss of weight is also our concern. Okay, how about hallucination? Nothing was mentioned about hallucination, but you will see signs, no? That the patient is seeing something or hearing something which you don't see or hear. But in the storyline, we don't read that much, no? Okay. How about SBO? Your patient had what? Your patient had a bowel movement. Although it was done yesterday, but it's okay. Give him some time, no? Okay, so this one is not a risk. Okay, so we're done dealing with number 3 now. Now let's proceed to number 4. So here, based on the above information, we should use an X to indicate whether the nursing actions listed are indicated or not a risk. So each row must have at least one response selected. So we all agree that this is a sign of what? This is a sign of your UTI, dehydration/delirium. So we should be able to treat that right away with your antibiotic like your ceftriaxone, which is very commonly given. Okay, at least we're starting him with something, no? And then that urine sample, usually class, we will send that to the lab to analyze, no? So we could progress further with the treatment. Do you think we can change that ceftriaxone to something else, or can we keep that based on the finding of the urine culture analysis, no? So at least we're starting off with something, no, to treat the patient. Next is what? Request the primary care provider to change the analgesic medication to a non-opioid drug. So this is what? Yes, because class, when you treat your patients with opioids, do you think that will further contribute to the delirium? Absolutely yes. Because, opioids can cause that, no? They can cause delirium episodes too. Okay, that can even worsen his current condition. So non-opioids like what? What is an example of your non-opioids? Like your NSAIDs, anticonvulsants. Okay, anticonvulsants are common examples of this is your pregabalin and your gabapentin. I've seen this many times with our elderly class. So gabapentin or pregabalin class, we commonly give this to elderlies with pain management, no? These are a lot safer alternative as compared to giving them a Dilaudid or morphine or fentanyl, which will only worsen their condition. So non-opioid is the key here, okay? What else? We even give them lidocaine patches. This is similar to your Salonpas, but it does contain lidocaine. So for this guy who has sustained some injuries from the fall, we could patch a lidocaine patch on the affected side, no? Okay, so that is acceptable also. NSAIDs, another example is your ketorolac, your ibuprofen. But you just have to be careful with the results. No, is it prone to bleeding or what? So you just have to be aware of that too. Okay, monitor his blood sugar hourly. This is only indicated class. Okay, the blood sugar monitoring hourly unless your patient has what? For example, DM1. If they have DKA or DM2 complication, which is your HHNS, that is only applicable to that. But this guy clearly has a well-maintained blood sugar, so we don't need to do an hourly blood sugar checks, okay? Next is what? Requesting for a Geodon or a Prazolam during the agitation episodes, class. So, class, I know we've been dealing with this before, the Geodon and a Prazolam, but it will also only make it worse, class, mind you. So that's why, as much as possible, we try to use non-medication approaches, like try to distract the patient. We play cards with them. We try to distract them by watching TV. We try to chit-chat with them instead of resorting to giving them the Geodon or Xanax, okay? We sometimes ask the family member to come at the bedside and stay with them for the midnight. Okay, because that's usually the time that they get worse, no? So usually we beg for them to stay with their parents for the whole night. Or we give them, familiar objects that they really love, like family pictures or, items that they really love holding to, no? Just to help them manage with their agitation. And those strategies seem to work class. Instead of resorting to giving them Geodon or Xanax. Okay, even during agitation episodes. I hope you guys get it. Okay, so it's a big no-no, okay? How about this one? Encouraging physical activity during the day, class. Why? Why do we do this? Because to help what? Okay, it will make them exhausted during the day so that at night they can sleep. So that's why we give them a lot of activities during the day. So here, class, we have people who are volunteers, and all they do during the day is they play cards with the elderly, they read stories, they watch movies with them. They're like sitters basically, but that's all they do. No, we call them the geriatric pal. So the job of these people is like the things that I mentioned a while ago. Like they play with them, they play cards, they play, not poker, but they just play cards, or they do something else. They listen to music, or they talk about anything under the sun. And then that has significantly helped our agitated clients class. Okay? The Jerry Pal. Okay, next. Let's deal with not only that, there's still a continuation. Okay. Change his bed to an enclosure bed. What is an enclosure bed? This is an enclosure bed, and I've encountered this here. Okay, an enclosure bed class is common to patients who have fractures. And patients who are, you cannot really control them. They're very, very impulsive, poses a risk for safety, but this is considered a restraint. Okay, do you think we need to resort to restraint right now? Or should we try alternative measures instead of jumping right into your restraint? Remember, class, it really depends on the scenario if you should jump to a restraint right away. We can only do a restraint class. Like what? If your patient is being very, very physically abusive to the nurse, to the healthcare provider. Okay, so that's where we resort to restraints, Geodon, Aprazolam, Xanax, and everything. But this guy is just wandering, he's just an old guy who has delirium, just agitated, restless. But, you can still manage that without resorting to restraints. So remember, when you have restraints, be careful. Okay, and you need an order for that. You need a doctor's order for that. So not at risk, okay? Raise all four side rails up. So in the bed, usually you will hear, raise all side rails up. But what do you think, class? The patient will only get more, it will only increase their agitation, class, mind you, and they will try to climb out of bed. We did this before, class, because we thought, the family member is not here, so we can now raise all the side rails up, so it's fine. But what did my patient do? He tried to jump out of the bed, and that only made the situation worse. He was more agitated. So what I do, I only raise 3 side rails up, and I put the bedside table on the part which has the bedside side rail, which is not up. So that's where I put the bedside table. So that's where I position that strategically. Okay. And I always make sure that the patient is near the nurse's station. So whenever I make rounds, I can watch over him. And second is what? Assigning a patient safety seater, or what we call the 1:1 safety seater. What else? What other strategies can we do here instead of resorting to side rails up 4 sides? So we can also put them on video monitoring. I will be showing you, class, what are these devices, or what are these things that we use here. We utilize for the elderly and a very agitated and confused elderly. So like I said, so raising all side rails up is also a form of restraint. Okay, so that's a big no-no, class. Okay, ensure bed alarm or chair alarm is on. Okay, so that is good thing. Utilize the nonverbal pain scale assessment tool. Yes. So what does it mean, class? Nonverbal pain scale assessment is watching them. Are they wincing? Are they in pain? You'll see that on their faces. No, you'll see that on their vital signs. And we have been using that assessment tool to determine if they are on pain. And that helps a lot, especially if they are not able to verbalize the pain score. So we resort to nonverbal pain scale method. Okay. Next is asking the MD to discuss the patient's daughter regarding advance directive. Just, I know it's like, it's too early to tell, but we always deal with this. Why? It is very tricky to treat them without knowing the plan of care, without knowing the code status of your patient. Do they want a DNR? Do they want a DNI? Do they want a limited code? Limited code means what? The patient wants compression, the patient wants intubation, but the patient doesn't want pressors, doesn't want any other therapeutic methods. So that's what we call the limited code. Now, you will encounter that here. So sometimes I do encounter the other way around. They want pressors, they want vasopressors, they want therapy, but they don't want the parent to be under intubation or no chest compression. So we have what? We have certain rules to follow in case of an emergency. So in case of that, as early as now, we need to know the code status. The daughter needs to determine now, unless the patient has advanced directives. The only thing we are guided if the father or Mr. Wheeler made this decision before everything went downhill, before he had Alzheimer. Was he able to secure a advance directive before all of this happened, no? That will be our basis. But if we didn't do that, then we will rely to the next of kin's decision. Okay, that's very confusing to deal with, but I know we will teach you that here in IPAS. Okay, next is what? Okay, I will be showing you, class, some strategies that we utilize. So here are the common devices that we use here. So fall mats, okay? So whenever they try to jump out of bed, these are the fall mats that can catch them, At least it will help, it will keep them from sustaining further injury. So that's the fall mats. Next is the fall raise armband. So it is based on the scoring. No, we score our patients based on our assessment. That will help us make a decision. Should I put the wristband on my client with the fall risk? No. Okay. Next is what? So there are also things that we use here, like when they try to step on this one, it will alarm. Okay. We also have the chair alarm. It similarly looks like this one. And next is the grippy socks. We call this the grippy socks. Why? Because it has rough edges at the bottom that will help them from slipping off the floor. So regardless of race and gender and age, class, so we always use the grippy socks, no? Regardless of your diagnosis. So these are part of our standard SOP here that we always put them on these socks, okay? Next thing, okay, so other than that, we also put them on a shower chair. This is the shower chair. Okay, and this is the toilet surrounds. Okay, this is what? This is what we call the bath mats. Okay, and this is what we call the, I forgot what it's called. So these are the grab bars. So grab bars are very helpful when they're trying to get up from the, for example, like this, the shower, no, or when they're in the toilet. So the grab bars can help them hold from it, no, while they're trying to get up or go lower, no? Okay. What else can we put them on? So this is what we call the GPS tracker, class. So this is like a GPS tracker. So I've seen this in most of my elderly here who lives alone, like I said, class. So you will encounter elderlies that lives alone by themselves without any children. And when they fall, class, when they had an event of fall at home and they're by themselves, they will just press that button and that will trigger the EMS, okay, or the emergency medical system like the ambulance. That will trigger them to come to the house and do a welfare check on the elderly, what's going on. And they will see, of course, you will see the elderly on the floor or off the bed and they sustain some injuries and they will help the elderly be brought to the hospital. So the GPS tracker will help with that. Okay, this is what we call the pocket talker. Pocket talker. Sorry about my handwriting. Pocket talker, class, this is the device that I use for my elderly who has hard of hearing problems. And especially if they forget to bring their hearing aids, class, this is what I utilize, the pocket talker. Okay, this one is similar to your chair alarm. So when this elderly guy tries to get up off the wheelchair, that will trigger the alarm and it will be heard by everybody. Okay. Last but not the least, this is the CareView monitoring tower. So usually these are installed in the rooms of your patients, or this is the tower that we use here in Oregon. So this is installed in the room and I can bring that everywhere, and then a monitor tech from somewhere will be watching your elderly patient. And then they will either call you on the phone or your Vocera. They will tell you, hey, your patient in room 6 is trying to get up, and that CareView will tell you when, okay? So they will be able to watch your elderly, okay? So this is how it looks like on their end, if you're asking me, how does it look on the end of the technician who watches your elderly? So this is how it will look like. So they watch everybody who is on CareView monitoring. Okay, I hope that's clear with you guys, okay? Yan siya. So they will call you, hey, bed B2, for example, B2. Okay, he's trying to get out of bed. He's on the edge of the bed. So they will call you. Okay, at least you can go there. Worst case scenario, we have to put somebody inside the room of the patient and we call them the safety sitter. So they will be staying with the patient 24/7. So the people should be shifting every 12 hours. So these are typically either RNs or CNA. So it depends on the staffing. But typically these are manned by CNAs, class CNAs or LVNs. So we assign them on that room to stay with the patient, to talk with the patient, but they cannot sleep or use their cell phones, but some are doing that while they're looking after the client. Okay, that's very strictly imposed. Next is what? Okay, I hope the strategies have helped you answer the number 4. Now let's deal with number 5. We're almost there. Okay, so I forgot to to remove the answer. So use of a GPS tracker is a big yes, okay? But the hospice care is a big no-no, class. You know, he doesn't have a terminal illness yet. He's not terminally ill. He doesn't have cancer, you know. We only deal with the hospice care if we have those kind of episodes. If he's already on comfort care, like we call the comfort care, so, you know, the patient is apparently expected to pass away in the next month or the next 2 months or in the next few hours, in the next few days. So we put them on hospice care. That's what it means, okay? Respite care is a big yes. You know why? Respite care is what? It's similar to your daycare center. Like, for example, I have work and I want to send my elderly to a respite care. So they will take care of my mom or my dad for the next 48 hours. And when I'm ready, I can pick him up from the respite care center and he can go back to home with me. Okay, that's what the respite care means. It's like an alternative care caregiver for them. Okay, paid companion or sitter services is also a big yes. We can hire them also. So paid companion means they can go to my parents' house who lives 40 miles away from me, and then they go there to do their dishes, to do their laundry, to help them with their daily living, pass their medication. So that's what the paid companion means, okay? Vary activities from day to day. This is a big no-no. You know why? The more they will get confused, you know? If you vary their activities like today, oh, we will do this, and the next day you change it. Remember, these people rely on what? Routine activities. It must be done routinely. Okay, now if you break that routine, what will happen? They get agitated, you know, because they have a routine. No, a strategy of varying that or changing that every day will not help the elderly. Okay, so letter E is a big no-no. Okay, how about letter F? Providing orientation aids like your calendar and a clock in every corner of the house, that will also help with their mentation. How about letter G? Providing a variety of options when offering choices for the father. No. Variety is similar to letter E. Variety of options. You mean to say you have to limit the choices and make it simple, class. Hey, can you help with laundry? Help me with the laundry. You make commands. You make straightforward commands to them. Okay, and that helps with your strategy. So the word variation is a big no-no for elderly like him who has Alzheimer's already. Okay, so that answers the question in number 5, GPS tracker, respite care, paid companion, and providing orientation aids. Okay. What else can I share to you? Okay, last but not the least is your number 6. So the home health nurse now. So basically your guy went home already. Okay, he went home. Now, usually class, a case manager or a social worker pays a visit to your patient's house. Okay, to determine is there like a safety issue inside the house? Do you think there could be a sign of neglect from the daughter? You know, those are the things that they deal with on a daily basis whenever they make home visits. No? So the home health nurse conducts another home visit several weeks later to evaluate the outcomes and educate Mr. Willis and his daughter about the care plan. So we need to use an X to determine if it's what? Effective or ineffective. So like I said, class, evaluating outcomes, these are what? Outcomes that happen after the care was given to your client. So you just need to know, did it improve the situation or did it not improve the situation? So you need to know the signs there. Okay. The sitter stays at home with my dad, especially when I'm out to work. So that's your part of your safety sitter at home. So that's what? Effective. I'm excited that the donepezil can cure his Alzheimer's. So like I said, class, donepezil will not help cure the Alzheimer's, but it will only what? Stop the progression of the disease condition. Okay, it will only stop the progression, but not cure it. Okay, so this is what? Ineffective. So you need to make more education to this client about the donepezil drug. Okay, next, daddy wasn't able to plan for his advance directive. Now that it's lucid, we are unable to secure one. Like I said, class, if the patient is not able to secure the advance directive before he went downhill, the next of kin can help decide on that one. The next of kin can make the decision for the code status. Should not limit them from making the decision. So the key here is the next of kin, okay? So this is what ineffective. So you need to make more arrangements with them in terms of legalities, like somebody needs to talk to them about the advance directive in the future, that the daughter can also secure that regardless if the dad wasn't able to secure one or not. Okay, next, I bought another gadget, which is a medical alert system for dad. So meaning to say, she's been following some, some of the techniques and strategies. So this also helps the situation to stop her dad from getting another injury, Okay. I'm planning to take an international trip with dad in the coming weeks to distract him. Remember, class, this is another form of variation, Remember, they need routines. Do you think this will help the dad? I know it's international trip that will help him relax, but his condition might only worsen, like, where am I? The more he will get confused, the more he will get agitated. So in that regard, this is an ineffective approach. Just keep him at home or, walk with him on the park. That is enough. Okay. You don't need to go extra, like taking him internationally, and it's quite stressful for both of you. Okay. I usually keep the television on at all times. No, why? This is pertaining to what? His relaxation time, If the television is on at all times, it means to say the stimuli is always up. So we need to lessen the stimuli for the father, okay? That uses the grab bars I've installed in the washroom, especially when he needs help getting on and off the toilet or shower. So this is a big yes. So this only means that she is following the safety measures that were advised to her beforehand. Anyways, class, thank you so much for everybody who participated on our tonight's NGN class. So we will have another one in February. We will just keep you posted on the day when it will happen. But I hope we can get more viewers then, okay? So thank you so much for helping me answer this NGN case study for tonight. And I hope to see you all in IPAS. So if you have any questions on how to enroll, just hit the IPAS button there and you can make an inquiry and somebody will be able to answer your concerns. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us for tonight. And I hope to see you in our classes in the future. And have a good night.